Okay, hi everyone. This is the first time we're doing this, so obviously we have no idea what we're doing. I'm Trishank, your host, I guess. Let's do a round of introduction. Ashlesh is a computer scientist and entrepreneur at Entropy. Chase Chandler is a very smart fund manager in Tennessee. I'm sorry, what is your fund called again?
Canterbury Tollgate.
Very nice.
Yeah,
And
and it's not
GT,
smart.
GT is an aspiring young gentleman who used to be at NYU. I don't know who he's affiliated with now, but I had the misfortune of meeting him last year. um, yeah, so the reason why we're all here today is to discuss IQ and computation and all that good stuff, especially why IQ is BS. Even if we all don't agree, I think we can agree on that. Let me just quickly give some context about where we're coming from. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to share my Safari here. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So around last year before the pandemic, I think it was July or August, Nassim Taleb wrote an excellent essay and series of tweets criticizing IQ from a statistical point of view. Around the same time, I was thinking about this. I realized, hey, wait a minute. Actually, computation might have something to say about this too, and it just occurred to me that a very introduction into what the first essay. The idea behind the first essay is that universality is this idea in computer science that all computers are basically the same in terms of what they can and cannot do. Okay, so we're not talking about speed, we're not talking about memory size and all that good practical stuff that does come up in real life, but we're talking about the theory, right? Ashlesh, correct me if I get anything wrong
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Sure.
But this is basically the same as the Church-Turing thesis. It's not proven, but the point is that after decades of trying, logically, you can come up with hypercomputers and all that good stuff. You can build an infinite transfinite hierarchy of ever more powerful computers. But in actual physical reality, this is the best that we know how to do right now. So that's what we mean, whether you use x86 chips or ARM or whatever. What they can and cannot do is basically the same. And this is what I'm trying to say is that if human minds are computable, and I know this is controversial, we'll get to it. There are two main objections to this essay that are severely misunderstood at the time. One is that humans are not, but Trishang, humans are not computable. Humans are not machines. We'll talk about it. And the second one is that, what is the second one, Ashlesh? Yeah, but people are not all the same. Yeah, and I never said
Yeah.
that. In fact, it's one of the criticism that I talk about it down here too. Okay, but let me stop rambling. And then Ashlish and I and Sean McClure also talked about it. We wrote follow-up essays, which is why some people said, "Oh, but geniuses are clearly they're exponentially smarter." And we talk about how this is not very likely also from a computational point of view. For the similar reason that we don't know how to build such machines that know how to do exponential amount of work in a linear amount of time. And then the final essay that I think hopefully clears it all up is basically, look, so let's talk about the second objection, which is, yeah, okay, so even if humans have genetically, you cannot say that one race of humans has got more powerful computers than another. It just doesn't make sense, okay? And then but people are clearly different, so how do you explain that computationally? And this essay tries to clarify. Basically, too long didn't read is software. Okay, we're all fundamentally, we could have the same kind of computational power, but what differentiates you and me is that I have very different software than you do, right? That's the reason why I'm good at what I'm good at, and why you're good at what you're good at. And we have short lives. We can't be good at everything. In fact, you might necessarily need to have some trade-off just to be good at something. Okay, anyway, I'll stop rambling. Would anyone like to take it away from here? Questions, controversy? I know Chase, for example, probably has a major reservation with the thesis that humans are computable in the first place.
So you're passing it to me. I don't. So my first, I have a disclaimer, and that is that I am terribly ignorant on a lot of these topics. Like, so I didn't even get into Hofstadter stuff until you recommended it, or I was reading it and you said some good things about it, and then I really got into it more. Right. So and I'm not a computer scientist, and I dropped the C++ course in college, and so all of my knowledge has come from like an autodidact perspective, just reading a lot. So I have no problem with the computation metaphor or I don't think I have a problem with universal computation or computational universality, right? So just correct me if I get some terms wrong, but I've got my own experiences and what I've observed, and then what I've read, which has been all different sorts of coming from all different sorts of angles. So one thing I want to make sure we don't do is, Munger has a saying that to a man with a hammer, everything's like a nail. So it seems to me from an outsider's perspective that the most common advocates of the hard line kind of computational, the brain is purely computational, are computer guys and girls, right? So then, and for this conversation, I'm talking about people that I would put at a higher level in terms of their real world understanding. So not like the Daniel Dennett philosopher type stuff. I agree with some of what he says. I agree with what a lot of what Wolfram says. And I even agree with some of the stuff that Penrose says, which I didn't realize he was kind of blackballed in the in certain computational industries, but or areas.
No, I'm joking.
What's that? You broke up there on us.
He's the black sheep of computation, the computational theory of the human mind.
Yeah. If you take it, if you take his stuff, take out the microtubule part. So we don't go that far.
Yeah.
I don't understand what that is, and I don't think he really understands. I think what he's saying is I don't understand, but that anesthesiologist he worked with has some other hardcore. But if you just take it to the point of that most of computation is done by the unconscious part of the brain, the cerebrum. We don't really understand how the computation works. Now, we don't have to understand how the computation works to get to like an AGI type level, but but the point is, before we go down that rabbit hole, I agree with the complete destruction and dissemination of IQ using the computation metaphor. I think it's very apt, and I agree that assuming hardware is good, assuming there aren't any hardware problems, that people can learn just about whatever they want to learn. I do think there's one part that's missing, and that is that you actually mentioned this in your first piece there that you showed, not the one on creativity, but the one before that. At the end, you talk about how the Turing test or the Turing machine can replicate any computer given enough time. And I think that's kind of true with human. Given enough time, probably that's true. Any human can learn anything, but the real problem with IQ and the way intelligence is usually viewed is different people are smart in different ways. This is really what Ray Dalio has contributed to the public dialogue, beyond the investing world. Is he figured out that there is no smart. Everybody's smart in some sort of way. The guy who's yeah.
Exactly, and we know this from real life, that people are good at different things. Like this is ancient wisdom. I don't think I'm actually saying anything fundamentally new, but what I'm trying to destroy, I'm trying to hopefully at least raise the bar by saying, hey, look, what high IQ racialists are basically trying to imply is that there are genetic differences in the computational hardware, if you will. Even if you have reservations with the idea that humans are computers, their claim, and someone correct me if I'm misrepresenting them, their claim is that there are humans, there's clearly genetic differences between races of humans, and that's what leads to differences in IQ between populations, for example. That explains why one culture is doing better than another. And I'm saying, look, computationally, that's not true. We know that all computers are the same in terms of their power, what they can and cannot do. Right? There's a reason why Python and C, whatever language you argue, they can all compute. They can all you can write the same programs with them. There's no difference. And the same is true of humans, if the premise that humans are computable is true. And what does that mean? Am I saying humans are computers? No, I'm saying that, well, in a way, yes and no. Look, the problem is that just because our current computers are pitiful, our current hardware, our current software, they're really jokes compared to like the humblest little bacteria or insect you can find in nature. Those are wonderful little machines, but they're machines to me nevertheless. And I'm not using it as a derogatory point of view. I'm saying what a beautiful thing that nature can do. So like Gregory Chaitin has got a nice view of life as software, evolving software, right? But it is software. Life is very plastic. It's very open. It's very creative. That's what I mean by when I say humans are computable. When people like Ashlesh and I are saying that humans are computable, we're saying we're not trying to fit humans into a bed of Procristis and say we must fit into. So Chase, and I remember you brought up earlier, you're saying to computer guys, everything looks like a computer. This is probably true. The whole damn universe is a computer. Guilty as charged. But Gordon's shaking his head. But the reason why we're saying that is because we generally stand back and look at these things like, my God, I think we finally found. So okay, let me try to rephrase what we think computers are, what we mean by universality. Let me put it another way, see if we all can agree from that point of view. Computers are a physical system. A universal computer is a physical system that can copy the behavior of all physical systems, including itself. Now, if we if you knew how to mold it, how to reprogram it, you can make it copy some other thing. That is why you can use the equations to model the surface of a star, for example. Now, are we good at copying the whole damn star right down to like, I don't know how many trillions of atoms there are in it, actually. But no, not yet. But in principle, can we do it? Yes, we think so. If you knew how to do it. Whether we know how to do it, it's a whole different subject that we don't need to get into right now. But does that help to clarify the idea a little bit?
Yeah, makes sense. And also, do you want to talk about how so Wolfram talks about the universality a bit? Uh, is that the same as you've explained right now, or is it slightly different?
I'm not sure. Oh, Wolfram's hold on. The principle of computational equivalence. That's different.
Right.
The universality that I just described, I reformulated is certainly not my idea. It's David Deutsch. It's a great way to understand computation. I really owe this to him. What Wolfram talks about, and I talk about in my first essay, principle of computational equivalence is this: is there are different classes of computation. When he studied cellular automata, for example, he found that there's different behaviors of computer programs. It's class 1 up to class 4, and I forget. Some are very repetitive, they're very boring, they end up. The most interesting is class 4, and that's where universality comes in. These programs, they're all equivalent in the terms of the sophistication of, because they precisely because they're capable of universal computation. They can do anything any computer program can do. So if you look at any two programs in class 4, they are very rich. They're just as rich in computation as in terms of behavior, in terms of complexity. So that's why Wolfram means, like, if you take a look at a weather system, it could be just as rich as the human mind. Just because you don't know what it is doing, what it could be doing is just as intelligent as the human mind, just as unpredictable.
Okay.
That's Wolfram's principle of computation. Well, actually, it goes deeper than that. His point is, why is it that we have universality? Why is it that we get it so easily for free? And his explanation, his principle is partly to explain that. Is
Okay.
to explain why is it a mere accident that we get universality so easily in nature? Like, you can get it out of anything, out of DNA, out of Tinker Toys, out of like silicon chips. Does that roughly make sense?
Yeah,
I'm
makes sense.
butchering it a little bit. It's like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but is it because the nature has evolved to a point where everything looks sophisticated in some sense? Like every tiny process is complex in a certain way.
I don't know. That's a question best to ask Wolfram, but I suspect what he would say is that there's a reason why they all look complex. They don't just look complex, they are complex.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're capable of running any arbitrary program. And arbitrary programs are in general unpredictable. You can't even do simple things like predict whether a program will ever stop computing. So imagine any other kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we develop a quantum computer.
Sorry.
Unless we develop a quantum computer to can you hear me?
Yeah.
Unless you develop the quantum computer to falsify or to stop the halting or whatever. To stop the halting process.
This is something, quantum computers are not, so I'm not an expert in quantum computers. Ashlesh knows far more than I do here. What little I do know is this, which is that it's not thought that quantum computers can do what your classical old computers cannot. They can solve some problems faster, but that doesn't mean they can solve digitally uncomputable. They can't solve the halting problem, for example. Yeah. Not without breaking known laws of physics. And is that possible? Yeah, sure, but.
Well, then they'd have a halting problem themselves. Yeah, I read Aronson's piece about his student that proved the Netflix quantum Netflix algorithm, quantum algorithm wrong. Some guy had come up with an algorithm that a quantum computing algorithm that would make Netflix's deal like what it showed you somehow like exponentially faster. And his freshman 18 or 19-year-old student falsified it. Anyway, that was interesting. But I'll throw out. I know that. So Trushenk and Ashlesh, I'm assuming y'all are on the same page, and you're both you were at NYU together. I guess
that's the Russian collusion here. I brought in someone to back up the computational, someone to help him. Everything is a computation.
Actually, we haven't actually verified that Trushenk is not a computer yet. So we don't know.
It's indistinguishable. I'm insufficiently distinguishable.
He proves his own thesis by existing.
Look, I'm a simulation. I'm not even actually real. Why do you think I'm in a tropical island right now?
I'm still wondering if Sean McClure is your avatar, your West Coast avatar, so that on East Coast time, on East Coast time, you switch over to McClure and do stuff there.
If one backup of me fails, the other one will continue to live and do damage.
So I'll throw out a few things that I generally agree that. So I wonder if we're not explaining so assuming computation, incorporates everything we know, right? That's basically the idea. Well, are we not using human cognition or something that was created by human cognition to explain human cognition, right? So computation was, and human cognition is a part of nature, so this would apply to the weathering patterns. But maybe that's a part of the loop that just is what it is. That both human cognition and nature, and computers, they're all computational, and computers are our effort to. It's a manifestation of this natural kind of computation, kind of like math. Assuming we agree math existed before we got here, before we discovered prime numbers, they were already there. So that's one thing. A couple other things that I wrote down, like so computational universality, as I understand it, when you apply it to intelligence, which, assuming we can define these things, are it would say intelligence is a computational process, right? But so that's like a complex computation that produces intelligence. But most of the brain's computation, again, like I mentioned earlier, is done by the non-thinking, by the cerebellum, by the non-thinking part of the brain. So that's where most of the computation, I guess, that we're aware of comes from. So it seems like you can't separate the what people have learned without their knowing it, without their learning it, or the decisions they make without them knowing making those decisions. Whereas a computer, even if it's learning something, would theoretically, I guess, you'd have a way to figure out how it got to that decision, even if it's so complex. I guess we couldn't if the neural network's so complex and stuff like that. I understand that kind of idea, but generally, at least initially, we have the program, the rules that we set in place. So I don't know if we can separate human intelligence from emotion and from all of those, like what led someone to a certain place to learn a certain thing. Like if I relied on my high school algebra to learn math, I'd still be lost, right? I had to get to the real world and learn how it applied to the real world, and then you can go as far as you want, calculus, etc. But it's but it's all based on, at least how I learn it. I think how most average white American dudes sitting in a high school classroom would learn it. That you start teaching the normal ways and they're going to zone out. If you take it to real life, then they start to learn how things actually work. So yeah, how people learn things is different, but how they get there is seems very not mystical. None of this is mystical, but mysterious. None of that has anything to do with genetics. I mean, we may have to allow for a genetic role in terms of like girls, if we can talk about gender share. I don't know if that's allowed, but girls are naturally maybe better at some things than boys. Feynman has this story about how he taught his boy by telling stories that he made up, and he'd tell his little girl that, and she didn't want to hear his made up story. She wanted to hear what was in the book. And I that resonated with me because that's kind of how my kids are. So people learn differently. Yeah, so that's I threw a lot out there. But I'm interested to hear your response to that. Like, are we not describing are we not describing human cognition with something that human cognition developed? Right? Is that not kind of a circular loop?
Sure. Ashlesh, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I was talking to Shashank I think a few months ago regarding this. So with humans, the issue is, let's say someone learns very so differently from others, is that a lot of it depends on the choice of problems and how interested the person is in learning the problem, right? I mean, it like it really boils down to, so let's say I think so Trashank writes this in the first essay, like in the last few paragraphs. So let's say we consider two students who are in the same class, or same group, and they do study the same things, they are in the same environment and so on. So but the way in which they move forward and end up would be in a completely different place. So one student would probably research on math, and the other person would do something related to like what physics or something, and would be in a very different place in the future. uh, so it it really depends on what the human mind latches on to ultimately. So let's say you're interested in algebra, then you would pick up algebra like really well. And if I'm interested in, let's say, what physics, then I can go deeper on topics in let's say, I don't know, like astrophysics or something, and be a master in that. So it really depends on what the human mind is interested at the different stages in life, I guess, and that's how they sort of diverge. So
Exactly.
same people in the same same place would be very different in the future. So it's hard to point out that in terms of computation, but like the real world is kind of different.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought this up, because this is great. We can go into multiple different things here. One is,
Yeah.
so if you, here are other interesting things that Wolfram found, right? From a computational point of view, is this. Even if we, well, if we disagree that the human mind is computable, then okay. So let's start with Chase's original question, which is, aren't we using something man-made to describe man? Like that sounds pro-Christian, in the sense that in the beginning, man, we used to have steam engine metaphors of the human mind. Wasn't that wrong? Like now you guys are saying, well, the human mind's a computer because you guys are computer scientists. Of course you would say that. Yeah, guilty as charged. But there's a reason why we think this, and I would disagree that it's man-made. Actually, the original programmer is nature. Nature is the one who came out with computers. We just rediscovered it, like in a different form. Like we think life is software, for example, right? That the human brain is a very powerful kind of,
Wait,
a very plastic kind of computer. Sorry, go ahead.
Isn't this kind of like what he was talking about with math? And like, it's up to whether you think that prime numbers existed before we came up with prime numbers, or if they're just
Yeah, exactly.
more like a human's understanding of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, isn't that what he was asking about?
My prejudice, my bias is that, okay, so here's an interesting mystery, right? Why is it that math and computation can describe anything in nature at all? Like, is it a mere coincidence? And again, this is a very David Deutsch idea, which is that actually it's not a coincidence, because if you think of computation as this universal physical process, right, that can copy, now you can see the mapping between math and reality. If there exists this universal physical system, it was already there in nature. The reason why you can use nature to understand itself is because that optionality was already there in nature. It's not like man made it. It was there in nature, and we just figured out a way to build it. Does that make sense? That latent capability was already there in nature. If you think about it, that's the reason why any sort of intelligence is possible at all. Like, why is it that we can use math, supposedly abstract, for example, or could simulate the behavior move around in complicated airflows? Like, it's not a mere coincidence. It's there. So I would disagree that it is man-made. I think man just discovered what's there in nature, which is to use nature to understand itself. That's one way of looking at it. And the second thing to relate to what Ashlesh said, if you, so regardless of whether, okay, just because humans are computable doesn't mean we know how to program anything remotely as sophisticated. We just have no idea. We just don't seem that smart. Like, how many decades have we been trying, Ashlesh? Like, that's the holy grail of computer science. If you think about it, that is the best computer program ever. The kind of programs that can teach themselves and figure out to solve problems. You don't have to program computers anymore. They would program themselves. But we're just not, man is not smart enough to do it. Even if he has this machine, he knows in principle it can be done. Doesn't mean we'll ever know how to do it.
Yeah, like we
Right?
have good theories right now. We have like excellent theories. Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, but like in practice, we are far behind. Yeah.
And I don't know whether we'll ever be. I think realistically, if man were to discover something like AGI, artificial general intelligence, it has to be something by copying evolution. I don't think man is smart enough to top down explicitly construct something as intelligent as himself. I'm just very skeptical of that. But going back to your, okay, so if you take a look at human beings as two different computer programs, if you take a look at something Wolfram discovered, is that if you take a cellular automaton and you change one cell, it leads to a radically different outcome, right? And that sort of explains why two human beings who are actually very, very similar might even be very close to discovering the same damn things, but someone had that one slight difference. And that's the point I go into in my final essay, why creativity trumps IQ, is that actually computation explains why people end up in very, very extremely different trajectories. You can explain it completely from a computational point of view. And you can show cellular automaton to people and they will instantly get it. It's like, oh yeah, I get it now. And that difference could come from anywhere. It could be maybe you were born with a slightly different, one genetic mutation that leads to you ultimately having a different idea. I don't know. Doesn't mean you're a superhuman, but, or, you were taking a walk and you saw something, a snake eating its own tail, and you get an idea about it, or some radioactive particle coming from space and hitting the right neuron in your head, leading, who knows? The point is that different comes from somewhere, and you end up going in a completely, I might be rambling and going off in a different, but
No, you're not.
I'm actually proving my own point here. I'm going on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, but so one thing that doesn't really address is that why do some people look like they are in the genius territory versus some who are not? Like I know the answer to it, but I want your your take on this. Because like in my view, it's essentially the society views genius as this person who has solved some specific problem that has massive impact. But the notion of what is impactful is only known later, not like earlier.
Yeah, the payoff space,
Um,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
so
This reminds me, this is supposedly an apocryphal story. I don't know how true this is, but supposedly someone, I think the Queen Victoria, I think. I'm a very bad historian. I tend to butcher stories to make them more interesting. Oh, Gordon knows all about this. But supposedly Queen Victoria asked Faraday, of what use is this electricity of yours? You know, it's new. It's like he was showing you could move frog legs or something. And he came up with a brilliant reply, which is, of what use is a newborn baby? Exactly. Nobody knows. It could be useful. It could be completely useless. Not the baby. I mean, electricity. But exactly, people tend to look at, you might have a very simple but disproportionately profitable idea, and so the fallacy there is to think, oh, therefore superhuman effort must have been involved. Just because the payoff is, looks
Okay, I have a
Yeah.
question. So, if humans are universal, if I'm understanding you correctly, if humans are universal, shouldn't there be kind of like some intelligence ergodicity where like a smart person can become dumb and a dumb person can become smart?
Well, they are.
I
They
think
are.
we see
Dumb
that in
people,
humans
smart
too, right?
people
All
are
the
really
time. Yeah.
dumb. Yes, smart people
Yeah,
are
but I
really
mean like limited to a
True.
specific field. Like for math, shouldn't we see like some people becoming dumber or some people becoming smarter and like fluctuating back and forth?
Well, I think one of the keys of just like for any process, once you learn something, you've learned it. The key is learning it.
Right.
Assuming it's a constant, if it's a, predicting weather patterns or stock prices through, through the orbits of the planet, then that's different. But assuming that you're learning good heuristics or physical laws, once you learn it, you learn it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure ergodicity applies here, but I think I see what Gordon is trying to say, and you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding. But I think okay, isn't it interesting that this convergent evolution of ideas, that people around the same time somehow arrive at the same idea? It's not like Charles Darwin was the only one who came up with theory of evolution. Wallace did too. I don't know whether he proposed a mechanism, but he also realized that creatures must have gradually evolved. What are the famous examples of convergent evolution can you guys think of? The other one is the
So
theory of
Newton and
quantum.
Leibniz.
Sorry.
Newton and Leibniz.
Newton and Leibniz.
Developed
That's a famous one,
Leibniz.
exactly. But who
Famous
gets
one,
all the credit? It's Newton. He was very good at rewriting history.
I mean, he was prolific. He was prolific in his writings.
Well, who came up with Bayes' theorem? Who came up with Bayes' theorem?
Oh no, are you telling me it's not Bayes?
Is this Thomas Bayes or something? No.
Bayes got the credit, but Bayes didn't even publish his work. His friend Richard Fisher published the work after Bayes
Oh,
died.
really? Wow.
Bayes
Okay.
didn't even know he'd come up with anything. So the way Bayes came up with it is he was standing at a pool table and he imagined, just a thought experiment, imagined throwing a ball up, right, and it landing on, one side of the table or the other. And then if you have that information, I'm going to butcher this too, Trishane, but if you have that information, you get that information, you throw another ball up, and what's the chance that it lands on one side of the table or the other based on,
based on the prior information. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just a random thought experiment. Didn't really go anywhere. And then Laplace is the one who formalized it as we know it. And
interesting.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I want to bust. So I think Gordon hit on something interesting here, which is that if it's true that the human mind is universal, at least in terms of hardware, I'm not saying software, right? I never say software. I never said all humans, if you run them infinitely forever, if they never died, you no longer even count as human. But let's say you could.
Like I don't like this hardware software, so distinction with the human mind, because
finally. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because what exactly is software and hardware in the human mind is unclear. I mean, because
True.
neural, you have new neural, links or uh, joints that happen based on your experience and memory and so on. So it's essentially software is sort of rewriting the hardware and the other way around as well. So
Exactly. That's a brilliant point. I'm glad you brought it up. Exactly. Because people say, oh, geniuses are like this people with faster CPU or bigger RAM size. And I'm like, it, they forget to consider your point, which is that why are they faster? Because they spend the time thinking about this and essentially rewriting their brains to do it faster in hardware, right? It's not like they were
that's a good
born
point.
with it
Yeah.
necessarily. They were not born with a circuitry to think about, I don't know, differential equations all day. But if you did nothing but that for 10 years, guess what? You are rewiring your brain. You will get faster at it. That doesn't
So
mean you were born with it. That doesn't mean that there's a genetic difference.
that's the plasticity. That's
The
the
plasticity, yeah, exactly.
plasticity, the ability to learn and you open up new neural pathways and everything. So one of the questions I have is uh, so in bear in mind, none of this has anything to do with one of our friends who's very intelligent, but had he told me it was a matter of materialism versus non-materialism. I don't think that that's right. I'm not arguing from so if you just purely argue from a material point of view, still some of these things I have questions about. So that one of them is the hardware versus the software. So if you think about the computer has you mentioned this in your piece, identical. If you have, you can run the same software even if the hardware is different, right?
Yeah.
Humans have kind of the reverse effect. They have seemingly the same hardware, but then they learn to run, or however they learn, whatever the process is, it's different. Same hardware, different applications for different people.
Ooh,
So yeah,
that's a good one. I like it. Yeah, yeah. Same phone, different apps. I like it. That's a way to describe human beings. Although some people might find that offensive, but yeah, that's a great metaphor. I love it. Yeah. I'm the
whereas if you
Trushank
have
app, you're the
computers,
Chase app, he's the Ashlesh app, and we have the GT app. It's an app for everything.
yeah, right. If we both have the
Yeah.
same computer, we could run the same program, same speed, same, everything. If the hardware is identical, we're able to run the same software. Whereas you and I might have the same, looking type of brain hardware, but we're running completely different software. And I'm not saying that. So I think Gordon mentioned this. So math was there. The humans didn't invent mathematics. It was there before. Humans didn't invent computation. It was there before. But the application of it, the zeros and ones, how we apply it, the bits, is human devised application. So the real question is, how much is still left to find out? How much do we still not know that goes into, not only human intelligence, consciousness, awareness, the brain, whether there's quantum effects, how much of it is quantum, and then computation in other areas, like you said, nature. So every generation, I think, has trouble with. They kind of overstate their confidence in that. So you think Galileo as the prototypical example, or the prime example, right? But you can say it about Laplace too, or Newton, or whoever else. It's Newton, his gravitational theories wouldn't have passed the p-value test, right? So every generation has their thing, and I don't see what else it could be other than computation, some sort of computational process that we can't understand like you said. But I think that's kind of a point of emphasis is we might end up losing people that would otherwise agree just because they see it as an overly kind of computational argument.
Yeah,
Not
sure.
acknowledging.
I mean, that's fair, right? And Ashlesh and I think, would be the first to say, hey, look, we're not saying we're absolutely right and you guys are all idiots and wrong for not agreeing with us and all that stuff. No, we're not. We could be completely wrong. Maybe nature is much more powerful than our pitiful digital computers, and it's not computable in that sense. There's a more powerful type of computer maybe to be found. Who knows? I don't know. What we're saying is consider if we're right, that the universe is computable in the sense that there's this universal physical system, right? It's like a recursive system. You can think of the universe as a recursive system. There's this thing built into the universe, right? And man is part of the universe. He's his material. If the universe is computable and man is part of the universe, then man is also computable. Doesn't mean we'll ever know how. All we're saying is what we know about computers is this, that there's no difference between different types of hard. Sure, there are differences, but fundamentally they can do and cannot do the same things. That's it. That's the important thing to take away with IQ. That's it. That's all we care about, is that a human mind is computable. There's no such thing as a race of human beings who can think thoughts that the other race can never in a million billion years. Doesn't matter how much time you give them, they will forever be a race of idiots. There's no such thing. That's all we're trying to say. We could be wrong. Maybe genetically there's a race of hypercomputers. They're the equivalent of hypercomputers. And people like Ashlesh and I are forever stuck. Indians, by the way, have a national, apparently average IQ of 80. So, we'll forever be stuck in this local,
Is that
minima.
is that 8 out of 100 or?
Yeah, I think 100 is the average, right? The norm, yeah.
No, as in is it like 80 like 80 over 100, or is it 80 over whatever, infinite?
You say
I think it's normalized, right? 100 is supposed to be I think it's normalized, right? 100 is the average.
No idea how
this
this
average, and 80 is basically idiot territory.
So Shank's cutting out because of the internet connection in Malaysia. They really need the low Earth orbit satellites.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
No, you're fine.
I think they need the Starlink. Yeah, the Starlink.
Starlink. Yeah. No, I don't see how you could get around the computational metaphor. I don't see how you get around that, and that seems obvious to me. I think you're totally right there on the IQ side. I think it's just a matter of how much do we not know? How much?
Oh, we don't know a lot. First of all, we don't. Yeah.
I mean, the one theory is that brain of the human mind has a hypercomputer that sort of defines what the lower level does. It's like if I'm able to, let's say, learn math and so on, then why would I learn it? That has to be some sort of higher level intelligence that is talking to me or talking to my lower level intelligence, saying that, please learn math and you would probably do well in life. Some sort of different levels of intelligence, and that's one of the proposed theories wherein, that is also termed as your consciousness, and it delves into those areas, but they try to somehow make sure that it's not what physical in some sense.
Yeah, that's.
Isn't it also kind of hard to compartmentalize intelligence? Like, if someone is good at math naturally, they also have an emotional draw towards math, towards learning math. They get some kick out of it.
Exactly.
It's all very fuzzy.
Yeah, exactly. But the high IQ racialists would say, but that's you see, it's no coincidence that there's one race of human beings who are consistently coming up with Nobel Prizes, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can all move on from the IQ racialists. I don't think really anybody is on their side, at least in our group. I haven't really heard anybody
in our group. Yes, the whole reason we're having this discussion is not for us. I think we all agree, even if we don't agree that the human mind is computable, we all agree that IQ is BS. But my concern is that there are people who truly fundamentally believe in the genetic superiority of some, and that's what we're here partly to do. But yeah, I agree. We can move on.
That was a topic of discussion. Everything else, which I would agree with you, Gordon, that we agree with that, and I'm tempted to try to delve into the more esoteric or exotic or philosophical kind of areas or the unknowns. But that's the pressing issue is the IQ, the genetics, the IQ geneticist type people. That a lot of them think it, they don't even know they think it. And there's on the left it's on the left and the right, and they both have different different kind of solutions to the problem. But the main thing, like why does one certain group not do well? Why does this group consistently do better? Why do Asians do so much better at math than non-Asians? Why is this group consistently lower, make less income, do worse?
Yeah, exactly. And then they use IQ as this scientific explanation. See
It's
it as
an
this
easy
magical number.
Yeah, it correlates well, right? They run their regression and it correlates, and they think that means something. So they stop looking for alternative explanations, and it's you call it lazy, or you could call it they're idiots or whatever. But they never look at maybe how have humans intervened in those people's lives to
Yeah.
like if you go into a computer that would otherwise work well, and you think as someone who can't verify whether like someone like me who doesn't know what the red wire, the blue wire, or the white wire means, but you say, okay, well, you convince yourself that it's the white wire, so you pull that. Well, now you've just screwed up that computer without knowing it. Now I've just screwed up with that computer. I quite that's how it basically interventionalists have messed up kind of natural processes with certain groups, entire groups of people, forcing them into certain neighborhoods or industries or I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but not to be too euphemistic, but just like as great as not civil rights, but affirmative action was in a lot of ways, it also, nobody ever talks about the effects that could have on someone's development.
Exactly. It's a very dangerous, pernicious idea. The whole reason why we're here busting IQ from whatever point of view we care about is that actually the computational point of view is liberating. It's saying that, hey, it doesn't matter what sort of hardware, for the lack of a better word, I know Ashlesh hates it, you're born with. It doesn't matter. Focus on your software. It's what you do that matters. You can change yourself. You're not born with this. You're not stuck here. Right?
Yeah, and I would say for the people because I grew up in a very, very religious, background. I'd say for the people that have a problem seeing as computation is, first of all, the material versus non-material almost doesn't matter from that standpoint. It matters in other areas, obviously, and I'm not making any claims about that. But even if I would even posit that, and this is something that's beyond, maybe would take a whole other discussion, but I would even posit that even if you assume that it's all material, we don't know how all the material works. We don't know how this quantum, these atoms that we can isolate, we don't know how they work, until we screw it up, until we isolate them. And so there's all sorts of stuff that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the unknown, is the computational, however it got here or evolved, which obviously it's evolved. So however it's evolved, it's there. I think that you can't escape that.
Yeah, I mean, to actually talk about so Roger Penrose's argument regarding microtubules, I mean, he has a certain point there wherein, I mean, we could obviously say that we almost know everything about the human mind. It's a bunch of atoms, blah, blah, blah. But there might be something that is still unknown, that is still a possibility. It might not be microtubules, it might be something else.
Yeah.
But that still might be a possibility that there is something that we don't know about. So I think that possibility still exists. Yeah.
This is true. Like, that's the most valuable thing about Penrose, is that even if he's wrong in a very interesting way. I think he's most likely wrong, but I completely respect him from a technical point of view. Like, he's solid, but I I think his mistake is that he's trying too hard for the human mind not to be computational. Like, no, I can't believe this. This cannot possibly be true. It has to be something more powerful.
I think that he thinks. Well, I think he might even agree that the in terms of his chances of being right might be low on that. He says it's just speculation, but it's the part before that, like what is consciousness, that where his good points are. And Aronson, what's his name?
Scott Aronson, yeah.
Scott Aronson, I think, agrees with that part. It's where you get to the actual, microtubules and what that how that whole theory kind of plays out that gets really iffy. But it's his connection with you have to have understanding as a part of intelligence, even though you can't define exactly understanding, right? But just bear with me. So understanding is you have to have understanding to have intelligence. You have to have awareness to have understanding. So where does all that come from? Well, so in this conversation, from a purely computational perspective, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think he debates that a lot of it is that intelligence itself, that information, that the mind's processing of information is largely computational, almost entirely computational. I think he's talking about how are we aware of what we're learning? Because a computer, what he would say is it wouldn't be aware, and Aronson would say, well, what does it matter? Why does it matter if it's aware? And that's the more philosophical discussion.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's very much similar to David Chalmers' argument of the hard theory of consciousness, wherein it says that you can have like an intelligent machine do everything that a human does, but it wouldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
So it's hard to describe what it is. So it's like what I can eat an apple and feel a great sense of taste, I guess, right?
And my point is we don't know how that affects your intelligence. How that impacts your intelligence. Is that a dumb statement?
No. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's hard to know exactly how it affects or it does not. So that's like unknown. Yeah.
Well, my answer to that, and we have like 4 minutes left. I'll try to wrap it up real quick. My answer to that would be something like this. Imagine if, and I know this is going to sound silly, but bear with me. But you're taking a walk in the woods in the middle of the night, and a little gray alien comes out of nowhere and tries to convince you very, very hard, hey, I'm just like you. I can do, I can feel, and it dances for you, and it solves hard equations and all that good stuff. It's like, see, I'm just as intelligent as you are. But then suddenly, all of a sudden, it reveals, it takes out the little gray spacesuit. Turns out it's nothing but, like, I don't know, silicon underneath. Does it change what you just saw? Like, do you suddenly revise your belief that this is not a thinking, feeling being? I know it sounds silly, but that's
it's like
sort of the metaphor here. Sorry?
The ex machina.
Yeah, ex machina. And I think Hofstadter had a similar metaphor too. It really does sound strange when computer types like Ashlesh and me and say, listen, the hardware really doesn't matter if the software is the same. But this is the thing here. We're saying the medium doesn't matter. It's what you do with it that counts. And I think we should wrap up with that because we have like 3 minutes left. Is there anything you guys want to talk about? Anything we should conclude with? I don't know. How did this go? Should we do it again? Or is this a terrible, terrible failure?
No. We should probably do this again sometime. Yeah, we should.
Yeah, it's fun.
Probably
it's
talk
fun. At least for our own pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, talk more about the arguments beyond IQ.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Fuck IQ. It's so boring. You're right.
Yeah,
Gordon's definitely right about that.
There is a question of how to convince, if it's possible to convince people that IQ that are not in our camp, that are in the IQ camp. How is it possible?
That's a good point.
I don't know.
I think the main thing I've been hearing a lot overlapped is the idea that there's a big disconnect between at least what we think of intelligence and like practice, in terms of like you can do very well on an IQ test, but it doesn't say anything about how you do in like business or anything in practice. Like your reasoning skills may be very good, but it doesn't mean that that's the only part of intelligence that you should focus on. Like the you know, the example that Taleb often gives about like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what comes after, and like the logical answer would be 7, but who's to say it wouldn't be like 20, 28 or like 35 or 357 or something, you know?
Samuel L. Jackson comes out, surprise,
So
mofo.
like almost every normal person, most normal, I don't know about Trishak, but most normal people would be able to like think like, yeah, like anything could come after 6. So just having that one piece of like reasoning itself has already set you as like a competent person for the real world. And anything in intelligence comes that would be like saying 7 comes after, or like finding some obscure mathematical rule or something. So there's like a disconnect between intelligence and practice. Practice only requires a certain amount of competency.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Trishak.
No, go ahead, please.
There's what's his name? Got his book up here somewhere. Emmanuel Dermond. He wrote Models Behaving Badly. He has this thing in Models Behaving Badly. He has this basically, I think it's a framework for how we think and make decisions. But he said you have theories, you have models, and you have intuition. And you test your theories against, you have some experiment to test your theories. You try to apply models, and when you don't have either, you use intuition. So we have to distinguish in which areas we're talking about theories, models, and intuition. And we can say for sure that the models that people use to describe results with IQ are wrong. They're off. They don't know what they're talking about, right? So we can say that for sure.
Yeah, I think my favorite one was the plot where Nassim showed. What was the x-axis is IQ and y is wealth. How much it's just hilarious because it's so random. You can see people with very, very low IQ with a lot of money are like, hell yeah, that's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, and then below a certain point it correlates, and that's what creates the high correlation overall, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I applied that to finance. You have the same thing with the mean variance models. You can take a few assets that have exact opposite correlations over a certain period, and throw a bunch of other random stuff in there, and it gives you a good mean variance output, but it means nothing. It's only those few variables that are those few assets that have the exact opposite correlations that are determining the entire model. So IQ's doing the same thing. That's but it seems hard for people to understand. I do think it'd be interesting to get into the other stuff, but that's for another day.
Also, but Trishak, you should probably take in questions or whatever.
I think we should.
Comments or anything. Yeah.
I have no idea how we're. Oh shit! I forgot there were a few questions people from Twitter wanted to answer. I completely. I thought GT would do his job. GT, what are we paying you for? What are we paying?
I'm good on time. Ashlesh, you had to go. You said you might have to go after.
Yes, what time is it? Yeah, it's 2 minutes past. Okay, my time. Okay, yeah. I'll probably take off, guys. So yeah, we should probably do this once a month or something. I think it's interesting. Yeah.
We should. I just want to get Ashlesh off so we have one. So we can have 2 against 1. 2 non-computer scientists against 1 computer scientist.
Okay. Yeah, it was fun, guys. Cool. I'll take off.